Startup Central, and I'm sure you guessed why it's special by now, because it's not every day that the CEO of one of the world's most admired technology companies and certainly the most valuable comes calling to India. We are, of course, talking about Apple CEO Tim Cook.
All right, Chandra, I'm standing here outside the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai, in Colaba, opposite the famous Gateway of India. And Tim Cook just went out of this hotel room thanks to an all cameraman, everybody outside of here falling over each other. There's a scuffle out here with the cops, so it's absolute madness outside here. And we're going to do this show from right here outside where Tim Cook is staying at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Colaba. And I have with me the man who's been tracking Tim Cook since morning over here, Ashwin Mohan from ET Now. Ashwin, thank you so much for joining us here on ET Now Startup Central. And guess what? It's a good time to tell the audience that he was lucky enough to actually meet Tim Cook and shake hands with him. Ashwin, tell us, what was that conversation like?
Well, Krishna, as you know, the entire Apple team has been rather evasive. They've kept a low profile, and I did manage to squeeze in a few precious moments with the Apple chief. He was busy the entire day, a whole series of meetings with telecom operators and the top brass of the startup industry. In fact, he also started his day with a breakfast meeting with Cyrus Mistry, the chairman of the Tata Group. I had a pointed question for him because let's not forget that there is a good reason why Tim Cook is in India, Krishna. And it's clearly for two reasons. The saturated overseas markets and, of course, the beginning of the 4G revolution. And that's one of the main reasons why he's finally been forced to make an entry to India, which is, of course, the world's smartest cell phone, the biggest smartphone market. So my pointed question to him was, has India overtaken China, or is there a potential for India to overtake China? He gave a very diplomatic answer. He said, India is a fantastic country, my friend, and I'm having a blast over here. So that's where it ended. Those are the few moments we had with the Apple head honcho, Krishna.
But this meeting, this arrival of Tim Cook in India, you know, we all know that he's going to have his taste of Bollywood eventually in the evening. He's going to be at Shah Rukh Khan's house. But what was the day like from morning till now? As in, like, you know, put it in a nutshell for us.
Well, let me put it in a nutshell, and this is exactly how perhaps Tim Cook described India. India could very well be the next China. If you look at Apple's smartphone share, it hovers at around 3%. And clearly, Tim Cook needed a bit of divine intervention. And perhaps it's no surprise that he started the day, wee hours of the morning, with a visit to the Siddhivinayak temple, where he took the blessings of God. And then he came back for a breakfast meeting, as I said earlier, with the Tata Group chairman. He also, in fact, caught up with the entire Ambani family. He had lunch with them. He also met some of the senior members of the Reliance Jio team. Let's not forget that there could be a strategic reason over there, because Reliance Jio is soon to start its commercial operations. And of course, let's not forget that the Tatas have also kick-started their e-commerce platform. So he met the key players in the e-commerce industry, he met the key players in the telecom industry, and now, of course, he's all set for a slice of Bollywood. He's slated to meet the who's who of Tinseltown, Krishna.
I will absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashwin, for taking time out to be with us here on ET Now Startup Central. Continue tracking Tim Cook for the rest of the day. For those of you watching on Chandra, so that, you know, sums up, you know, the way from the journalist's eye, as far as Tim Cook's India visit is concerned. This man has been here the entire day, Chandra, and he just got a snatch of a meeting with him, and he shook hands with him, and he said India is a fantastic market, and I'm glad to be here. Back to you, Chandra, in Bengaluru.
Thanks for that, Krishna. I mean, it's not every day that, you know, the CEO of one of the world's most admired tech companies, certainly the most valuable, comes calling. So this is certainly a significant day, and we are tracking every bit of that. In fact, here's something that we broke first up a couple of days back on Apple launching its startup accelerator in India, something that they have confirmed today. So that's a story that ET Now brought to you first. Now, Apple will open an iOS design and development accelerator in Bangalore. It will kick off early next year, and it will really give developers an opportunity to work with tools that power iOS apps worldwide, and also get a first up review of this with Apple experts every week. In fact, to really find out the significance of this, we spoke to one of the key players who also will be collaborating with Apple closely, Ravi Gururaj, the chairman of NASSCOM's product council, to just find out why this accelerator is significant and different from the tons of other accelerators around.
We are delighted to see Apple make this new initiative in India to help our product ecosystem, our mobile app ecosystem really grow and thrive. I think a delightful out-of-box experience is critical to success going forward. And we've known Apple's been an expert at that, and I'm glad they're bringing the expertise to Indian ecosystem.
Give us the backstory. How did this really start? Did it start with Modi's visit to Bay Area, and how did it really come to fruition, or is it tied to Tim Cook's visit to India?
Well, I think they've just announced it at Tim Cook's visit to India. I think I don't know all the backstory. To be very frank with you, I don't. But I suspect they've been planning this for some time. I think India is a big market. I think it's as Tim Cook himself says in his release that India is a very important market from the developer perspective. I think it's one that has been less tapped into by Apple, and I think they want to put in more beef in there. Try and really expand the efforts, and I think that's very welcome because the timing is right. I think a lot of developers are now looking to go mobile. They're looking to build innovative global apps out of India, and I think the Indian market itself is ready for really beautiful apps, right? And that are built made in India.
Right. And how is NASSCOM going to be associated with this? I mean, in that release we saw thumbs up coming from Snapdeal, Zomato, and also NASSCOM President RC. So how is NASSCOM going to be involved in building this accelerator for them, or perhaps providing support from your own startup warehouse?
Yeah, so we're a stakeholder in the ecosystem. Apple is a very critical element of the ecosystem. We would be delighted to help them succeed here, just as we do with other platform players and all the companies that wish to engage with the startup ecosystem. So to that extent, it's a very general, broad engagement. I think if they look to us for further support, we'd be open to helping, right? I think Apple knows best what's best for Apple developers. That's what we want them to bring here and drive them and give them whatever assistance they might need to reach out to the community, to kind of engage with our developer ecosystem and to facilitate in whatever way we can. But I think fundamentally Apple has to drive this program, right? They understand what's best.
Right. Finally, some critics would say that this accelerator, it's just window dressing. The main push is going to be Apple stores and refurbished phones. So from that perspective, is this just the latest in a long line of accelerators that we have seen from MNCs? What really sets it apart?
Well, I don't think it's window dressing at all. Okay, I think it's a very critical, important move from the developer and the mobile app ecosystem perspective. I think I was at Apple headquarters, a couple of weeks ago when they hosted us, the InnoTrek delegation, and we received some early kind of tasting of what they might have to offer when some of their experts came out and talked to us about what it takes to build a great app. I think that's the kind of expertise, that's the kind of knowledge transfer, that's the kind of guidance and mentoring that they can provide direct from Apple for made in India products.
Yes. All right, that was Ravi Gururaj of NASSCOM in conversation talking about the all-important accelerator which Tim Cook inaugurated in Bengaluru. And I have with me another man who was lucky enough to sit on a round-table conversation with Tim Cook right here at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Colaba in Mumbai. Apurva Roy Choudhury, CEO of Synapse. Thank you so much for being here on ET Now Startup Central. So Apurva Roy Choudhury has a startup called Synapse, which builds apps for the dashboard on Apple's platform, and he got a chance, one of the 4 developers, to have a round-table chat with Tim Cook. Apurva, what was the round-table chat with Tim Cook all about, and what was it like?
Well, Tim Cook really wanted to see the kind of work we're doing in India, so I guess Apple chose 4 of us to present our work. He came in and we presented our apps to him. He actually had a deep look in our apps. He had very meaningful opinions about it and had a deep conversation about the app. It was amazing to actually be able to present our work to the CEO of Apple, who's the biggest partner company we have.
And what was Tim Cook's approach to the startup ecosystem in India? Could you get a sense, like for example, the startup ecosystem in the country is nothing but boomed in the last couple of years. Was Tim Cook, how aware of was Tim Cook of it, and what was his contribution that he's looking to make to the startup ecosystem here in India?
Well, I think he's very, very aware of the boom in the Indian market, and I think Apple considers India as one of the largest potential markets out there.
Okay.
And he's also aware that the app ecosystem, especially the iOS App Store ecosystem, is not very strong, has got not good traction in India, and they're looking at doing major changes for the country in the next 12 to 18 months to make a difference. Of course, being a secretive company, Apple does not share a lot of information with the outside world, so it's hard to say, but indications are good. We feel very optimistic about the app ecosystem, and we think that there's going to be a lot more entrepreneurship in the app side of things in times to come.
And what is the sense you got from that meeting? Are you going to do more work with Apple? And more importantly, what was Tim Cook like a person to have that meeting with? How chilled out was he?
Oh, we've always, from seeing his videos and keynote speeches, we've always known that he's a very relaxed and humble kind of person, but he was even more humble and relaxed and chilled out with us. It was a fun meeting. He actually got into our apps, he held our apps, he played with them. He had very meaningful feedback for it.
Okay.
So it was a very humbling experience to actually sit with Tim Cook and do this.
I can only imagine. Apurva, thank you so much for being here on 18 Hours Startup Central, and all the best with Synapse. So that was Apurva Chaudhary, CEO of a startup called Synapse, one of the 4 developers to be invited by Apple and Tim Cook to have a roundtable meeting right here at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Colaba in Mumbai. Back to you, Chandra, in Bengaluru.
Krishna, thank you for getting the voice that matters the most today. Someone who actually met and spoke to Tim Cook. But now we have a very special guest on the show, Krishna, because beyond this hype and hoopla, the fact of the matter is that India is a very important market for Apple. So beyond startups and developers, that's what they're looking to do, really expand the market. Their retail stores are going to be key, and the sale of refurbished phones is going to be key. We don't know yet if the government is going to have a rethink on that count. But to really get more perspective on that, we are joined by a very special guest, a globally renowned Apple analyst, someone who knows everything about Apple, who's really tracked this for years. Horace Dediu joining us all the way from the US East Coast of Asympco. Thank you so much for joining us on 18 Hours Startup Central. I want to start by asking you, as someone who's tracked Apple very closely over the years, what do you make of Tim Cook's high-profile India visit and the way it's really looking at it as a big market now?
Well, I think so. I don't know when. That's an open question. But as far as the opportunity for Apple, India is as large as China. The population certainly is there. The potential for economic prosperity is there. The growth opportunity in terms of middle class as a percentage of population is there. So from the macroeconomic point of view, there is no distinction as far as I can see.
Alright, this is Krishna coming to you from outside the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai, where Tim Cook is staying on his visit over here. Now, I have to ask you this simple question. Pricing, India is such a really price-sensitive market. You have a competitor like Samsung, which has phones from all ranges, and you have the Chinese phone makers now, capturing so much market share. How do you think Apple can crack the price code here as far as the Indian market is concerned? At the end of the day, Apple phones are considered super expensive, even today, even with all the 5C innovations that they did. Apple is a super expensive phone in India. If they want to have a larger India play, how do you think they can crack the price code here?
Well, I hear a lot about the price sensitivity, but again, I think that's a macroeconomic consideration. There are many people in China who couldn't afford iPhones 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, and there are still many who can't afford it today. But there's a demand for the product today. I also remember a time when Nokia was 70% market share in India. I was at Nokia at the time, in fact. So preferences do change. People went from Nokia to Samsung, and they can certainly change again. Pricing is also something that Apple can affect through its decisions in terms of product mix. So certainly these are not insurmountable problems.
How important do you think the sale of refurbished phones is going to be for Apple to be able to expand its market? I mean, that's something it was banking on, but that was turned down by the government recently, and there's indication that this is something that Cook is going to push for in his meeting with the top government officials. But how key do you think that is going to be?
Well, it's certainly an important issue in the short term because I think that's one of the strategies that Apple has tried to use, and I think they've used successfully in other emerging markets. The issue is a political one, I believe. But again, I'm hopeful because we had political issues with respect to other distribution questions. For example, retail sector opening up in India for Apple, which Apple considers very important to its brand. And that certainly seems to have been resolved. So I think as a political discussion, there are opportunities there as well. But let's bear in mind that this is a short-term issue. If India was really important to Apple, and I think it is, Apple should be making changes in its product mix in order to accommodate India. This has happened before, again, with China. We saw variants of the iPhone, although not seeming apparent on the surface, but there are changes in the product and also in the ecosystem and many other details behind the scenes in terms of accommodations for China. And I think this can happen for India as well.
Horace, I want to understand this. You spoke about product mix. Tell us, what kind of a product mix or strategy do you think that Apple should be looking at to crack the market over here in India? It has about 3% or even it has a minuscule market share over here. If it needs to capture a significant market share, what is the product mix or strategy that Apple should be looking at?
We have to be aware of the time dimension. It took 5 years for Apple to really become strong in China, and I think it may take another 5 years. So it's difficult to really foresee that far ahead in crystal ball gazing, as you say. There are many things behind the scenes, certainly in distribution and retail, but also things like opening research centers, encouraging developers, reaching out to various partnerships with mobile operators so that they could encourage people to try things. Even things like around financing the product through creative ways of offering incentives and so on. A lot of things may be tried, a lot of things may fail, but I think this is about persistence over a long period of time, making sure they crack the nut, as Tim Cook has before referred to the problem in China. So they felt they had cracked the Chinese puzzle in 2012, and I think they're trying now to figure that out in India.
If you really talk to critics, the sense that they give about Apple is it's been largely indifferent to India compared to, say, a Google, a Facebook, or even an Amazon in recent years. I know this is not an apple-to-apple comparison, pun intended there, but do you think, this renewed push is coming now because they have no choice that India is one of the last growth markets that they can tap into alongside China?
Well, there's two questions there. I think India's always been important. It's only about a matter of timing for Apple, because what we've seen is that in many ways 4G networks were not present. There was a time, I remember when the iPhone 3G launched, there were people asking, why doesn't it come to India? And the answer was simply there were no 3G networks in India at the time. And so now we're starting to see networks become available. And also, generally speaking, the economy, the prosperity, the number of people in the middle class needs to grow to a certain level for Apple to have a sufficient presence in terms of market share. Oops, I apologize. The question also, as far as the competitors in Google and Amazon and others, those products tend to be free in terms of what users need to pay at the beginning. And Apple is not a product that is free, and generally it's a hardware product. And so we have to be aware of some of these limitations in terms of their brand. And certainly I could also turn that question around and ask why those brands that you mentioned are not accepted in China. And those, again, are banned for political reasons in China. So everyone has to bear the burdens of their brand and the politics involved.
All right, Horace, after all, we are here at ET Now Startup Center. So let's talk about the impact on startups and the developer ecosystem over here in India, considering that, both Apple and Tim Cook have huge plans as far as engaging with the India startup ecosystem goes. We just spoke to a developer over here who was part of the round table of 4 developers who sat with Tim Cook today here at the Taj Mahal Hotel in Colaba. Talk to us about the impact of it on startups over here in the country.
Yes, that's actually a great opportunity because India is known for its great intellectual capital. Obviously, we've had decades of involvement in the IT sector by Indian firms and Indian talent and individuals. They're no stranger to the IT economy, and certainly having them involved in the app economy is great. I think there's a strong correlation between the local communities building apps and the availability of the product. It's something that we saw in China develop, we saw in Western Europe developing, and we have, as Apple likes to point out, millions of jobs created by the app economy in those national economies. And it would be wonderful for India to develop that same degree of success for its developers. And it's a matter of time, and I think these things do work together nicely, and there's going to be a wonderful opportunity, I think, for developers in India.
Finally, in his recent earnings call, Tim Cook said that he sees India where China was 7 to 10 years back. Do a little crystal ball gazing for us. In 7 to 10 years, does India have the potential to even, surpass China, become a dominant market for Apple? How is that going to pan out?
Well, let's be, of course, realistic. What does it mean to be successful in China is only still a very tiny market share compared to the overall number of users. But it is drawing a great deal of growth from China. So I wouldn't suggest that Apple, even in 10 years, would have anything close to a majority. I would even say perhaps not even 20% market share in India. Nevertheless, what typically Apple does is obtains the most valuable customers in a market. So in the sense that these are the people who are likely to spend the most, to engage the most, to shop the most, to be most visible and influential. And so this is the question for India, I think, really is can Apple rise to the point where it's seen as the brand of choice for aspirational middle-class individuals? That is more of a brand question, and I think indeed over time the delivering great quality product consistently brings you that sort of brand appeal. And the same can be said for many brands. It's not just Apple, and that's really, I think, what's driving the strategy of the company. It's not a tactical game. It's very much a strategic brand development game for Apple.
Thank you so much, Horace Dediu, for joining us on ET Now Startup Central, really getting that global perspective on why India is so important for Apple. But with that, we come to the final segment of the special show, and the final segment, Number Crunch, is also dedicated to Apple. The number we are crunching for you today is rupees 87,000. Now, that's the amount that Tim Cook is going to shell out per night to really stay at the luxury suite of Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, outside which Krishna is presently standing. But with that, we come to the end of this special edition of ET Now Startup Central. But stay tuned in to ET Now all evening for all the updates on Tim Cook and his India journey.
That's right, Chandra. 87,000 rupees is definitely small change for Tim Cook. But guess what? I was just in Goa and I paid 3,000 bucks a night for a shack on the beach over there. So compared to that, 87,000 rupees is a lot to shell out per night. But you're right. With that, we do wrap things up here on a special edition of ET Now Startup Central. But continue watching ET Now for the rest of the evening. We'll bring you all the details of Tim Cook's big visit here to India.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.